everybody. Today we are going to talk about the Eight of Swords as requested by one of my subscribers. In this series, I try to give my unique perspective on some more complicated tarot cards. And so if you have a suggestion or a question, a request regarding a card that you have been struggling with, feel free to leave a comment and I might make a video on that specific card explaining its meaning from my understanding and my experience. So today we are going to talk about the Eight of Swords. And in these videos, as I always try to present a different approach than what you find in the more mainstream and popular resources on the internet. And I just want to say, this is a disclaimer, these are my opinions on this card. So if you don't agree with it, if you feel like it doesn't fall in line with how you see this card, then feel free to, have a difference of opinion. It's just my thoughts and my understanding of these cards. So when it comes to the Eight of Swords, I think the general consensus about this card has always been, and this is what I've seen in many, many different articles and books and videos about the topic. The central theme that people think this card revolves around is victimhood. So it's the idea of this woman, it's most likely a woman, being loosely tied and surrounded by some swords. She's all alone, she's blindfolded, and it's almost like she's choosing to put herself in this position of the martyr, the victim. And so the consensus is that she could break out of this position, that she could change her situation, that she's not powerless. It's almost like she's just pretending to have been taken hostage, that she has all the power to break free. And that has never made a lot of sense to me, because that's sort of unexplained. Like, what is the appeal? What's the allure of pretending to be a victim? That's never really, that's not really something that we've ever gotten any answers on. So I thought about it, and I think the central theme of this card is pain and pleasure. When you look at this card, and if you've been followed around by this card for a while, it's understandably an unsettling feeling, because there's just so much darkness emanating from this card. It's somehow so macabre and so grim. And so that's basically the two driving forces, if you think about it, in our lives: pleasure and pain. Generally speaking, when you experience pain, physical or emotional or mental pain of any kind, you're kind of deterred. It's almost like you're learning what to do and what not to do by being struck by a sort of pain after certain activities. For example, if you touch something that's really hot and you get burned, you will not likely do that again. You're learning that that's an uncomfortable feeling, that's a painful feeling, and the physical discomfort is resulting in you avoiding that activity in the future. So from an evolutionary perspective, pain is almost like a teaching tool. And in certain, emotional areas as well, the emotional pain of being ridiculed or shamed, embarrassed by a certain behavior can condition you to avoid that sort of behavior in the future. But when it comes to emotions and the mental level of pain, because given the fact that these are swords, we're talking about something that has to do with our way of thinking and our intellect. So when it comes to those more abstract things, we can certainly argue that it's more complicated than that. We have a complicated relationship with pain. And, looking at this card, one can even think about the practices of the BDSM community. Being tied up, being vulnerable, being exposed, being a victim, and the pleasure that comes from giving up your power, and the pleasure associated with a certain level of pain. And so I think what this card is really talking about is the hidden pleasures that we sometimes experience when torturing ourselves. So it's interesting to really honestly examine our lives and think about all those aspects of our lives where we experience pain, but still we go back for more. Why could that be? Let's say there's a very painful relationship where you're humiliated and used and abused, and yet there's a strange sort of attraction that somehow makes you gravitate towards that experience again and again. So it seems like there is a very specific kind of pleasure that we can gain from putting ourselves in painful positions. And there is, and this, I think this is a big taboo subject, but it's true. I find it to be true that there's a certain level of excitement and perhaps even curiosity, intellectual curiosity, surrounding suffering. So if you just think about the morbid curiosity of that exists within all of us. Why are true crime mysteries and shows so popular? Why are we so interested in pain and death and violence and, all those kinds of things, when we know that those things are associated with pain? I think it's ultimately my understanding is that the Age of Swords is about it explains why we choose to put ourselves in those situations again and again. It explains the magnetism of these situations. And the reason is we want to learn. We are just simply intellectually driven to test the limitations of our own perception, consciousness, to see if there's even more pleasure to be found somewhere else. Human beings are complicated, and after a while, you develop a tolerance. If you've ever gotten a new job that you really enjoyed, that helped you earn a lot of money, and that made you very excited in the beginning, and then after a while, after let's say 6 months or something, you started to notice that it's just not cutting it anymore, that you're just not experiencing the same sort of exhilaration when you think about your job. So it's easy to develop a tolerance for not only pain but also for pleasure. And I think this is what this card dances around. It dances around the subject of how pain and pleasure are both a spectrum that we continuously need to where we continuously need to push our limitations in order to have an intellectually nourishing experience. So here's one of the things that it can mean. If this card is following you, I can see you having a lot of guilt and a lot of shame about a situation that's, just, it seems completely unreasonable to even expose yourself to that kind of thing. For example, a job that is, torturous, that you don't enjoy, where you are being not appreciated, perhaps even abused. And everybody's looking at you like, what are you doing? Why are you staying in this painful situation? Why are you not changing your life? And so I think this card is just reminding you that this is part of the human experience. So it's not necessarily only your responsibility to break free from these situations. It might be somehow implicit in your psychology, in your personality. It might be it might be something that you're wired to do as a human being, to sometimes choose the more painful path forward. Because obviously, what the Eight of Swords is always seems to be suggesting, according to most tarot readers, is that she could easily free herself. The bondage is not that tight. And then she could take off the blindfold and just walk away. So it's basically an act that she is not really, she's not really a prisoner. She could always walk away, which might be true, but here's the thing: it's not the bondage, it's not the blindfold, and it's not the whole situation that's keeping her captive. It's her attitude. And that's where a lot of tarot readers sometimes put the blame on the person who's experiencing this. But here's my perspective. I think once you have a little bit of compassion for the human condition, for who you are, and just accept that you cannot help it, even though it would make sense for you to simply leave and walk away from a painful situation. It might not happen right away. And piling onto that negativity by blaming yourself, when this is something that is obviously a part of your perhaps evolutionary makeup. There might be some reason why we like to do this, why we tend to do this as human beings. So piling onto that with a lot of accusations and blame towards yourself might just make the situation worse. So I think a gentle, compassionate approach to those people who are going through this, and to yourself when you are going through this, can make a big difference. And it can perhaps lead you back to a position where you again have more power, where you can be more in charge of, of your life and of your decisions, and where you can get back on track, onto a healthier future. I hope that you enjoyed this reading, this explanation of this card. If you have any questions, feel free to comment, or you can also email me if you'd like. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in our next video.